They pushed her down in front of everyone, laughing, filming, certain she'd stay silent. But the new black girl at Westfield High wasn't just another target. In 15 minutes, the bullies who ruled this school would learn that the quietest person in the hallway was the most dangerous one. The morning light poured through the tall glass windows of Westfield High, painting gold across the marble floor. Students streamed through the main hallway, laughing, chatting, their designer sneakers squeaking against the polished surface. It was the kind of place where money spoke before anyone else did. And that morning, a new voice entered the silence. Maya Torres walked quietly, a slim black girl with a worn leather backpack hugged close to her chest. Her steps were steady, her eyes calm. She didn't belong to the sea of polished white faces and perfect haircuts around her, yet there was something about her stillness that made people glance twice. Blake Morrison noticed it first. Son of the mayor. Captain of the football team. The self-proclaimed king of Westfield High. He was used to seeing fear when he looked at new students, especially ones who didn't fit the mold. But this girl didn't flinch. That bothered him. As Maya stopped by her locker, checking a folded schedule, Blake's smirk widened. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, his Letterman jacket catching the light. Around him, the hallway noise dimmed. 200 students felt it, the moment when the king was about to choose his next target. Blake's shoulder slammed into hers. The impact echoed like a gunshot. Maya stumbled, books and papers scattering across the floor like broken feathers. A few gasps, then laughter. Phones came up, recording. "Welcome to Westfield High, stranger," Blake said, loud enough for the cameras. The crowd chuckled. Some looked away. No one stepped forward. Maya knelt, gathering her papers one by one, her hands steady. She didn't speak. She didn't even glance at him. Her reflection glimmered on the marble as if the floor itself was holding its breath. When she rose, the laughter died down. She was smaller than Blake, but in that silence, she somehow stood taller. Her dark eyes lifted, meeting his without a word. Something flickered there, not fear, not anger, but quiet calculation. Blake frowned, confused by the absence of reaction. He turned to his friends, brushing it off with a laugh. "Guess she's too scared to talk," he said. The moment passed, swallowed by hallway chatter. Students moved again, the noise returning, but a few glanced back at her, sensing something different. Maya adjusted her backpack and started walking toward class, her posture straight, her pace measured. She didn't look back. But her gaze, just before turning the corner, drifted upward for a split second, tracing the ceiling. Camera number 1, above the main stairwell. Camera number 2, near the east hallway intersection. Each red light blinked faintly, and she remembered every position. In 15 minutes, Blake Morrison would realize he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, the sun rose sharp and bright over Westfield High, bouncing off the windshields of a row of luxury cars lined up in front of the gates. Engines purred, sunglasses flashed, and laughter drifted through the warm air like perfume. Westfield wasn't just a school, it was an ecosystem, perfectly balanced by privilege and fear. Everyone knew their place. The athletes ruled the halls, the cheerleaders ruled the image, and the rest survived in silence. The unspoken rule was simple: if you weren't born into power, stay out of its way. Blake Morrison was at the center of it all, a sun around which lesser stars revolved. He didn't just walk the campus, he owned it. Wherever he went, the hallway widened, as if even space itself moved to accommodate him. His father's money had built the new gymnasium, his mother's foundation sponsored the annual gala. Every teacher knew his last name. Every student knew better than to cross him. Behind him, Tyler Brooks trailed like a shadow, his build heavier, his temper shorter. Jessica Cole glided a step behind them, a vision of polished perfection in designer boots, every hair perfectly in place. She smiled the way only people certain of their superiority could smile, soft, but sharp at the edges. Maya Torres walked through that same hallway 30 minutes later, quiet as a breath of wind. Her uniform was plain, her backpack worn, her shoes clean but old. Heads turned, but she kept moving. A few whispers followed her, rippling down the corridor. That's her. The one Blake knocked down yesterday. Did you see the video? It's all over Snapchat. Then a voice, just loud enough to carry. That new black girl's already on Blake's radar. The laughter that followed was nervous, uneasy. Blake heard it from across the hall. He didn't need anyone to point her out. He'd already seen her reflection in his mind all morning, the girl who didn't cry, didn't flinch, didn't beg for mercy. It annoyed him more than he wanted to admit. Power only felt real when someone else broke under it. She hadn't. He leaned casually against a locker, watching her move. There was something deliberate in her stride. Not arrogance. Not fear. Control. The kind of balance athletes spend years trying to master. For a moment, he thought he imagined it. Then she shifted her books from one arm to the other, her posture perfectly aligned. The motion was so smooth it looked rehearsed. His smirk returned. Let's see how long that composure lasts, he murmured. Around him, the usual current of laughter and chatter resumed. But beneath the noise, the school's hierarchy hummed like machinery, efficient, polished, and cruel. Near the courtyard, two students were arguing about scholarships. One of them, a Latino boy, stopped mid-sentence when a teacher walked by and adjusted his tone instantly. On the steps above, a white senior with a varsity jacket laughed too loudly at nothing, just to be noticed. Westfield didn't need rules written on paper. It enforced them with glances, with silence, with the quiet pressure of belonging. Maya reached her first class and took a seat in the front row. The teacher, Mrs. Henderson, greeted her with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome, Miss Torres. I hope your first day went well." Maya returned the smile. It was educational. A few students chuckled. Blake, seated at the back, pretended not to listen, but his jaw tightened. Outside, sunlight spilled through the windows, catching the gold of the school crest engraved above the whiteboard, "Excellence through Legacy." Maya's gaze lingered on it. Legacy, another word for inherited power. As Mrs. Henderson began the lesson, Maya's pencil tapped twice against her notebook, a rhythm no one noticed but her. Each tap corresponded to something in her memory. Security camera placement. Entry points. Patterns of movement. The map was forming. She wasn't just surviving Westfield High. She was studying it, systematically, quietly, like an investigator dissecting a crime scene before anyone else knew a crime had been committed. Blake Morrison thought yesterday's shove had humiliated her. He was wrong. It had given her exactly what she needed, a starting point. By noon, the cafeteria of Westfield High buzzed with the sharp, metallic hum of teenage noise, trays clattering, laughter echoing off chrome tables, the scent of expensive perfume blending with overcooked pizza. Sunlight slanted through the wide glass windows, slicing across the room in perfect geometry. At one corner table, Maya Torres sat alone, quiet, her back straight, her focus steady on the pages of a small notebook. She ate slowly, one hand holding her sandwich, the other sketching tiny lines and words. Around her, the crowd flowed like a river that had learned to split in two. No one dared to sit beside her. Across the room, Blake Morrison spotted her. He leaned back in his chair, spinning a fork between his fingers, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. "There she is," he said. "Our quiet little celebrity." Tyler snorted beside him. "You mean the one who didn't learn her lesson?" Jessica Cole, perfectly groomed as always, smiled with a kind of sweetness that only made her cruelty sharper. "Oh, Blake," she said softly, "don't tell me you're still thinking about that girl." "Still?" Blake said, standing up. "I'm just getting started." Conversations dimmed as Blake crossed the room. His entourage followed like gravity itself. He moved slowly, letting everyone see, letting everyone understand who the moment belonged to. When he reached Maya's table, he didn't ask to sit. He simply dropped into the seat across from her, the metal chair screeching against the floor. "The famous fall from yesterday," he began, his voice light but sharp. "How's the floor? Still cold?" Maya didn't look up. She flipped a page in her notebook and took another bite of her sandwich. Tyler grinned. "I think she's ignoring you, man." Blake leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I'm talking to you," he said, louder this time. Maya's pencil paused mid-line. Her voice, when it came, was calm, quiet, and surgical. "I heard you. I'm choosing not to engage." The air thickened. Around them, laughter faded into silence. Jessica's smirk twitched. Tyler's jaw clenched. Blake's smile faltered, just for a second. Then he chuckled. "That's cute. You've got a little attitude." He nodded to Jessica, who leaned in until her perfume filled the space between them. "Girls like you don't last long here," she whispered. "You should know your place." Maya's eyes lifted slowly, not in defiance, but in assessment. She studied each of their faces as if memorizing details, tone, expression, proximity. Then, almost gently, she reached into her bag and placed her phone on the table. Its black screen reflected the cafeteria lights. "That's an interesting thing to say," she replied softly. "Mind repeating it?" Tyler frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I like to keep track of important conversations," Maya said. Her voice didn't rise, but something in it shifted, a subtle authority that didn't belong to a scared new student. For the first time, Blake hesitated. He glanced at the phone, then back at her. "You think that little trick is going to save you?" "I don't need saving," Maya said, returning to her sandwich. "I'm just documenting." Tyler slammed his palm on the table, making the trays jump. "You don't talk to him like that." Heads turned. The entire cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Blake leaned back, studying her, his tone turning low and deliberate. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about yesterday. It's about how things work here." Maya finally looked up. "And how do they work?" He spread his hands, like a preacher delivering a sermon. "Simple. I make the rules. Everyone else follows them. You fit in, or you disappear." Maya tilted her head slightly. "And if I choose neither?" Blake smiled thinly. "Then I make that choice for you." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Maya's pencil scratched across the page again, a single word written in neat handwriting: threat. She closed her notebook and met his gaze with calm precision. "Thank you for clarifying," she said. "I like things on record." The bell rang, shrill and sudden. Blake stood up slowly, his jaw tight. "Enjoy your lunch, Torres," he muttered. Jessica's smile returned, brittle and hollow. "You'll learn, sweetheart. Everyone does." They turned to leave. The crowd exhaled, the noise creeping back like a tide. Maya sat still, her phone quietly blinking on the tabletop. For a moment, her reflection appeared in the screen, composed, steady, unreadable. Then her gaze drifted upward. The ceiling camera above her blinked red, its tiny light flashing in rhythm with her thoughts. The voiceover came soft, measured, almost like a confession. "Some people fight back with fists. Others fight with proof." By late afternoon, the noise of Westfield High had faded into a hush. The long marble corridors that roared with chatter hours ago now echoed only with the faint tick of a distant clock. The sun dipped low, spilling thin amber light through the glass walls, and the air carried the kind of stillness that hides secrets. Maya Torres moved through it like a shadow. Her backpack hung loose on one shoulder, but inside it was organized with military precision: 2 notebooks, a small tablet, a compact power bank, and a folded blueprint of the school's floor plan. Every step she took was measured. Every turn, deliberate. She paused near the east hallway, pretending to tie her shoelace, her eyes flicking up toward the ceiling. Camera number 7. Slight tilt to the left. Blind spot near the vending machine. She jotted the details down on her tablet. Then she walked on. The library doors opened with a soft creak. Inside, the light was dim, the scent of paper and old wood mingling with the low hum of air conditioning. A few students whispered at distant tables, their voices too faint to matter. Maya took a seat near the back, where the shadows met the glow of the desk lamps. She opened her notebook and began to mark positions. Camera angles. Patrol routes. Areas with faulty coverage. What she found disturbed her. Certain corridors had full surveillance, almost obsessive in their coverage. Others, especially near the gym and cafeteria, had, coincidentally, limited views. It was too deliberate to be random. A soft voice broke her concentration. "You're the new girl, right? Maya?" She turned. A slender girl with nervous eyes and a soft-spoken tone stood there clutching a stack of books. "Sarah," she introduced herself quickly, glancing around. "Can I sit here?" Maya nodded. Sarah sat down, her hands fidgeting. "I saw what happened yesterday," she whispered. "You shouldn't have stood up to Blake. He doesn't let things go." Maya leaned back slightly, studying her. "You seem to know a lot about him." Sarah's laugh was short, bitter. "Everyone does. It's safer that way." Maya tapped her pen. "Safer how?" Sarah hesitated. Her eyes darted toward the ceiling, then back at Maya. "Whenever Blake's involved, the footage just disappears. It's like the cameras forget to record." The clock on the wall ticked once, loud in the silence. Maya's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Then maybe I should start watching who's holding the remote." Sarah frowned, not understanding. "I mean, Principal Anderson," she said. He's close with Blake's family. His dad's the mayor. Donations, politics, that kind of thing. Everyone knows but no one says it." Maya wrote a single line in her notebook, "Administrative link confirmed." "Thank you," she said softly. "You've been helpful." Sarah blinked. "Helpful? For what?" But Maya had already closed her notebook. The library lights flickered once, then steadied. Outside, thunder grumbled in the distance, though the sky was still clear. Maya stood, sliding her bag over her shoulder. "You should head home before it rains," she said. "Storm's coming." She didn't mean weather. In the hallway again, she moved faster now, retracing steps, double-checking corners. The faint reflection of her face followed her in the polished floor tiles. She didn't look scared, she looked focused, almost too calm. A vibration buzzed against her palm. A new message flashed on her phone screen. Unknown number. "Hope you've made your decision. Tomorrow will be interesting." Maya stared at it for a moment, then took a screenshot and archived it. Her thumb hovered over a contact saved only as "Control." She pressed call. The line connected with a single click. A voice answered, low, professional, without greeting. "Status." Maya's tone was quiet, controlled. "Pattern confirmed. Harassment linked to administrative cover. Multiple subjects involved." A pause. Then she added, requesting authorization for next phase. The reply came almost instantly. "Authorized. Keep cover. Support team on standby. Maintain low visibility." The call ended. Maya slipped the phone back into her pocket and exhaled slowly. For the first time, her composure softened. Not weakness, fatigue. The kind that comes with purpose. She walked to the end of the hall, pausing by the trophy case. Blake Morrison's face smiled from the center photo, holding last year's championship trophy. The plaque read, "Westfield's Pride." Maya's reflection stared back beside his, her dark eyes calm but unreadable. Two sides of the same glass. One built on arrogance, the other on evidence. The library clock chimed 6 times. Maya turned toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in perfect rhythm with the ticking above. She passed another camera, red light blinking faintly, and let her gaze linger just long enough for it to see her looking back. Outside, the evening had cooled. The wind carried the scent of rain, sharp and clean. She adjusted her jacket and walked toward the parking lot, blending into the growing dusk. The narration would return then, soft and steady. She wasn't just surviving Westfield High anymore. She was dissecting it. And soon, every secret it hid would belong to her. By the next morning, the main hallway of Westfield High pulsed with anticipation. Students leaned against lockers, whispering behind their phones, pretending to scroll but waiting for something. The air felt different, thicker, charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Word had spread that Blake Morrison was going to finish what he started. No one knew what that meant, but everyone wanted to see it. The crowd parted when Blake appeared, his Letterman jacket unzipped, his eyes cold and certain. Tyler Brooks walked a step behind, broad-shouldered, already cracking his knuckles. Jessica Cole followed at a distance, her expression tight, excitement flickering behind her mascaraed eyes. They didn't walk toward their next class. They walked toward a show. At the other end of the corridor, Maya Torres turned the corner. She carried her backpack the same way she had yesterday, close, secure, nothing flashy. Her steps didn't falter, her breathing didn't change. The moment she entered the hallway, conversations died. Phones lifted. The crowd closed in, forming an invisible arena. Blake stepped forward, his voice cutting through the silence. "Time's up, princess. You made your choice." Maya stopped, 3 paces away. Her tone was even, almost soft. "I did." Blake smiled without warmth. "Good. Because here, we like clarity. You see, this is my school." He took a slow step closer, lowering his voice so only she and the nearest phones could hear. "You people never belong here." The words hit like a slap. Gasps rippled through the students. Maya's expression didn't change. Her eyes, calm and unreadable, lifted to meet his. For one suspended second, everything went silent. Then Blake reached for her wrist. The motion was fast, but hers was faster. She twisted her arm in a smooth, circular motion, redirecting his grip with surgical precision. His balance broke. In one fluid movement, she pivoted, used his own momentum, and Blake crashed against the lockers with a metallic thud. The sound rang through the hall, loud and final. The crowd froze. Tyler reacted instantly, charging at her with a shout. Maya sidestepped, her movements sharp and controlled. Her left foot pivoted, her body turning just enough. His fist cut empty air, and before he could recover, her open palm struck his chest, redirecting his weight. He stumbled backward, arms flailing, landing hard beside Blake. Gasps turned to whispers, and whispers turned to stunned silence. Maya didn't chase. She didn't gloat. She stood centered, feet shoulder-width apart, her hands relaxed at her sides, breathing steady. Her eyes moved from Blake to Tyler, assessing, not challenging. Blake scrambled to his feet, rage flushing his face red. "You're finished," he shouted. "You're done at this school." He took a step toward her, but stopped when she tilted her head, just slightly. It wasn't a threat, but it made him hesitate. The red light from the hallway camera blinked above them, and for the first time, Blake seemed aware of it. He turned, scanning the crowd, realizing dozens of phones were pointed at him. Maya broke the silence first. "You wanted a show," she said quietly. Now it's recorded. The words weren't loud, but they carried. Every student in that hallway heard them. A murmur rolled through the group. Blake looked up again, noticing another camera further down the hall, and another, each one blinking, each one capturing every word, every move. His expression shifted from anger to uncertainty. "You think anyone cares what this looks like?" he barked, trying to laugh it off. "My dad owns this place." Maya tilted her head again, calm as stone. "Then I hope he likes reruns." Behind her, Tyler groaned, clutching his ribs. Jessica's confidence began to crack, she took a half-step back. The crowd sensed the shift, the kind that turns fear into awe. Someone whispered, "She dropped him like nothing." Another said, "Did you see how she moved? Like a pro." The hum of the crowd swelled, and Blake's control began to erode. He tried to shout over them, "Everyone put your phones away," but his voice was swallowed by the noise. Maya bent down, picked up her backpack, and slung it over one shoulder. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate. She adjusted a loose strap and looked at Blake one last time. "We're done here," she said simply. Then she turned and began walking toward the exit, leaving behind a hall full of frozen faces. No one followed her. No one dared. The camera above the doorway caught her leaving, the red indicator light blinking steadily. But what Blake didn't know was that it wasn't the only camera that mattered. The footage wasn't just being recorded, it was being uploaded, synced in real time to a secure server she'd set up the night before. Every second of his aggression, every word of his threat, every reaction of the crowd, archived, time-stamped, and beyond his reach. As Maya's footsteps faded down the corridor, the bell rang, startling the crowd into motion again. Students scattered, pretending to go about their routines, but the hallway buzzed with new energy. Blake leaned against the locker, breathing hard, sweat mixing with humiliation. Tyler sat on the floor beside him, too stunned to speak. Jessica whispered something about damage control, but no one was listening. The cameras were still rolling, and for the first time, Westfield's king looked small beneath their gaze. The narration returned, low and certain, echoing over the scene. For some people, power means control. For her, power meant proof. And proof, once captured, never disappears. The hallway was still buzzing with adrenaline when Blake Morrison staggered to his feet. His face was flushed red, not from pain, but humiliation. Around him, phones were still pointed in his direction, their tiny cameras blinking like 1,000 watchful eyes. He tried to brush off the dust from his jacket, tried to restore the image of control, but it was gone. The laughter, the dominance, the invisible crown he wore, gone. "You're done," he shouted, voice trembling. "You hear me? Done. My father will have you expelled before the day's over." His words cracked mid-sentence, echoing down the long corridor. Maya stopped. She turned slowly, calm as if she had expected this. Her hand slipped into her pocket, pulling out her phone. "You sure about that?" she asked. She tapped the screen. A voice filled the hallway, Blake's own, sharp and unmistakable. Bad things happen to those who don't appreciate Blake's friendship. Lost homework. Broken lockers. Accidents. You get the idea. The crowd gasped. A wave of whispers rippled through the hall. Someone dropped a notebook. Jessica's eyes went wide, her perfect composure shattering. "That's illegal," she blurted. "You can't record people like that without permission." Maya tilted her head slightly, her voice still calm, still steady. "Actually, Colorado is a one-party consent state," she said. "I can legally record any conversation I'm part of." She let the words hang there, deliberate and heavy. "And I've been recording since day one." The silence that followed was electric. The air itself seemed to pause. Blake's confidence drained from his face. "You think anyone's going to believe you," he said weakly. "You think a stupid video's enough to—" "It's not just one," Maya interrupted. She scrolled, revealing a screen full of audio files and timestamps. Every word. Every threat. Every accident you arranged. All linked. All backed up. Her tone didn't rise, but it carried the weight of inevitability. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a leather wallet. She opened it slowly, letting the fluorescent light catch the metal emblem inside. Maya Torres, she said. Daughter of Detective Robert Torres, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Civil Rights Division. The hallway erupted. Voices overlapped, gasps, shouts, the metallic click of phones capturing the moment. No way. She's FBI. She's his kid. Blake stumbled back a step, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth. Tyler froze in place. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the heavy double doors at the end of the corridor burst open. 3 figures in dark suits walked in, their badges flashing under the lights. The lead agent, a woman with silver hair tied in a tight bun, spoke with calm authority. Blake Morrison. Tyler Brooks. You're under arrest for harassment, conspiracy to violate student rights, and intimidation. Her voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. Students stepped aside, forming a path without being told. One of the agents approached Blake, reading his rights in a measured tone as he clicked the handcuffs into place. Blake shouted something about his father, but no one listened. Tyler tried to back away, but 2 students were already filming from behind him. Jessica froze, her mascara streaking as she whispered, "Oh my God." The agents moved with quiet precision, efficient and unhurried. Behind them, one more officer entered, holding a radio to his ear. Principal Anderson is being detained in his office, he said. Evidence confirmed. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The sound was followed by something no one expected, applause. It started small, from the far end of the hall, then grew louder, echoing against the polished walls. "Justice," someone shouted. Then another joined in. "Justice." Within seconds, the hallway was a chorus of voices. For the first time, Westfield High didn't feel like a kingdom. It felt like a reckoning. Maya stood still amid the noise, watching the agents lead Blake and Tyler away. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her expression was calm, but her eyes, sharp and unblinking, held something deeper. Not triumph. Resolution. As she turned, she noticed students lowering their phones, their faces lit not by fear but by awe. One girl in the front row, the same one who had laughed at her on her first day, whispered, "Thank you." Maya nodded once and began to walk toward the exit. The camera above caught her passing under it, the same one she had noted her first morning. The red light blinked steadily, as if saluting her on the way out. The voiceover returned, low and clear. Justice doesn't shout. It documents. And when the truth finally speaks, even the powerful have to listen. By late afternoon, the golden light of sunset washed over Westfield High, softening the edges of a day that had changed everything. The campus was quieter now, emptied of its usual arrogance and noise. The hallway that once echoed with whispers of fear now carried something different, relief. Outside the main office, FBI vehicles stood parked in neat lines, their blue lights faint against the fading sky. Maya Torres sat at a wooden table near the window, carefully organizing her files. Stacks of documents, audio logs, and signed statements lay before her, every page a voice that had finally been heard. The agents around her moved efficiently, their conversations low and professional. 23 new complaints filed, one of them said. Looks like the floodgates opened. Maya nodded slightly, eyes still on her work. Good, she said quietly. Let them speak. The agent smiled, impressed by the calm conviction of someone half his age. When the last folder was sealed and labeled, Maya leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, turning the floor to gold. She watched the dust motes drift in the light, peaceful for the first time since she'd arrived. Her phone buzzed once against the table. A message. She unlocked it. Agent Torres, we need your help. It's happening in Chicago. No name, no details, just coordinates and a sense of urgency. Maya stared at it for a long moment. Then she smiled, the kind of quiet smile that comes from purpose, not pride. She slid the phone back into her pocket and gathered her things. On her way out, she passed the bulletin board near the main entrance. A torn poster fluttered weakly in the breeze from the open doors. The words across it were faded, but still legible, "Stop bullying." Maya paused, reached out, and smoothed the paper flat. She pulled a small pin from her pocket and fixed the edges in place. The gesture was small, almost invisible, but it felt right. As she turned to leave, a voice stopped her. A younger student stood nearby, maybe 14, clutching her backpack straps nervously. Her voice trembled. "Thank you, for standing up." Maya met her eyes. "You don't thank someone for doing what's right," she said softly. "You just remember to do the same when it's your turn." The girl nodded, eyes bright, and hurried away. Outside, the sky burned orange and pink, stretching wide over the empty field. Maya walked across the courtyard, the sound of her footsteps steady and unhurried. For a moment, she stopped near the flagpole, looking up at the fluttering banner of the school, its colors vivid against the dying light. A breeze swept across the courtyard, carrying the scent of autumn leaves. The building behind her looked smaller now, stripped of its intimidation. She adjusted the strap of her backpack and started toward the parking lot. Halfway there, something caught her eye, a white card pinned to the notice board by the gate. No signature. Just 5 words, printed in plain black ink. "Some fights are worth having." Maya took the card, turned it over, then tucked it into her pocket. A single ray of sunlight caught her face as she walked away, her shadow stretching long behind her. The narration came soft, almost like a promise. She didn't fight to win. She fought so others wouldn't have to. And somewhere out there, another hallway waits for her, quiet, cruel, and about to learn what justice really looks like. If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.